Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbaugh.
Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because I have somebody on the show today who is really going to give us some insight into the global impact of 3 important pillars. Jonathan Lowe was born and raised in a small city called Aarhus in Denmark. He has 2 younger sisters, May and Kira. His father works as a psychologist, and his mom is a social welfare worker. In his early years, Jonathan Lowe was a national champion in the sport of badminton. He was passionate about both his sport and starting up small and local projects. Today is one of Denmark's most well-known entrepreneurs and business authors. He has been nominated as an Entrepreneur of the Year and is among Denmark's 100 most promising leaders, according to a major Danish business newspaper. In addition to being a serial entrepreneur, Lowe is a former head of marketing at the Chaos Pilots, named top 10 most innovative business schools in the world by Fast Company. He is also a former startup advisor and investor at Accelerace, the leading investment fund for startups in Denmark. His book, Listen Louder, and the Disruption book both made it to the top of the bestseller list in 2015 in the category of business and entrepreneurship. His latest book, The Guru Book, is an inspiring collection of 45 articles and interviews with well-known thought leaders and entrepreneurs whose leadership and strategic skills have resulted in very successful businesses. Jonathan Lowe wants to inspire others to follow their dreams and enable them to do so by sharing the experience and working tools from other great entrepreneurs and leaders of our time. Jonathan still lives in Denmark, but frequently travels across the world to do keynote speeches and workshops with major companies such as Vestas, Lego, and others. Jonathan Lowe, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
I'm glad you're here. Now, I've given our Legion a little bit about you, but can you share what your current passion is so that we get to know you even better?
Sure. I'm actually very passionate about the space between artificial intelligence and then human beings. So how are we going to use all this new technology to improve lives and not dehumanize ourselves and have nothing to do at the end? So, yeah, I'm from the tech world, but most and foremost, I'm a human like everyone else. So I both have a passion and a concern about the latest developments within this field.
I think that concern is for everybody, and a lot of the concern comes into the things that I think really affect our whole stability in regards to those whole fear factor issues. Fear of am I going to get hurt by it? Am I going to get invaded by it? Am I going to get affected by it? Meaning it's going to affect my career. And so when you start thinking about that from an innovative, perspective and talking about, leadership of innovation and creative thinking, is there a possibility that all of that human emotion and fear could be squashing, some innovations that otherwise we would have?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes maybe that's not even a bad thing. There is also I also have a big love for technology. But I also think that we should not just innovate for the sense of innovation or because we can do it. We should always, pauses are a good thing. And being hesitant is a good thing. And doubt is a good human feeling. So whenever I hear about something that we can do, I always try to ask myself, but should we do it as well? So I'm not really doubting that in the future we can build almost everything. Maybe the bigger question will be, should we build everything, and how do we guide the tech world and young people into, because this is also like philosophy within business. And philosophy is very small in business and very big in other subjects and part of our lives. But given that companies become as big as nations in turnover, they also start to have the same kind of responsibility, I think, as humans and as nations to start, thinking about what they're doing. I think all the debate with Zuckerberg and Facebook is showing just this, that we are realizing, wow, these were not just idealistic, cool Silicon Valley nerds, these were also really good business people that are growing businesses at a scale where we don't really understand what it's doing to us and our societies. And now we are starting to doubt whether it's entirely good. And I think this doubt and discussion is really crucial.
That's a really interesting point. Okay, so did you just add fuel to that whole fear?
Yeah, no, I mean, fear is also not a bad feeling. As long as it doesn't paralyze you, it also makes you move. I mean, I have started 4 companies and currently building my 5th, and it's always a combination of fascination and fear. Because, I don't fear failing because I've tried it before, but I fear that we will spend years of our lives, because that is our most important currency, that's our time. So I fear that we spend a lot of time and energy on a project that ends up having no impact in the world, because then for me it's a waste of time. I know you should love the process, but really I love when things have impact. And when they don't, I feel I have wasted my time on them.
Yeah, and there's one of the comments that you made in the book that you talked about the companies of the future, and the $1 billion companies of the future are going to be the companies that can affect 1 billion lives in our world. That's a pretty impactful statement. But there's 3 pillars, and that the book is the Guru book is pretty much centered around, and it's the entrepreneurship, the innovation, and the authentic leadership. And I think you were really talking about initially that authentic leadership piece. Are we doing the right thing? Are we doing, the things that can impact and affect humanity the most? And so when I think about the 45, contributors, to putting this book, you don't even call yourself an editor. You don't even call yourself an author. You call yourself an editor of the book, which I thought was great. Is that, all 45 of those are in here for various reasons. But if you were to say that there was kind of one that kind of just stood out, why did it stand out the most? And what should we take away from that particular one?
Yeah, I think I interviewed a guy called Daniel Burrows, who's from the US, who is a serial entrepreneur and a futurist. And he inspired me a great deal in his way of talking about how much we actually know about the future if we sit down and spend time understanding what is going on right now. Because of all this digital development, there are some accelerators that are going to happen whether we do it or not. And the question is, how are we then going to deal with the impact of this? I mean, when you have a smartphone, you don't go back to a dumb phone. And when you have 4G, you're going to get 5G and 6G. And so everything is going to speed up, meaning that you can do more. So with all this talk about artificial intelligence, we've been talking about it forever, but now it's coming to a point where we can actually utilize it. And then the question becomes, so now when the technology is ready, what are we going to do about it? And that is Burroughs' big point, that we have a lot of hard trends that we know pretty accurately when they are going to have a huge impact on our societies. But the question remaining is, it's up to us to then decide which way is that impact going to go. I mean, we can make a lot of jobs automatic, and we can choose not to do so. And if all companies decide that they will, their biggest target is to have no one working for them because that is going to be the best business model in the end, then what are all the rest going to do? And are we going to lose some of the people in our companies that might not be creating maximum value on the bottom line, but might be the colleagues that makes it attractive to actually go to work? Not the top salesman, but the human resources staff, or just the leader who shows empathy and who is authentic and makes us feel good about ourselves.
I think that's a really interesting point, and that's also a skill that has been notably in great need, and that's one of the things that we talk about a lot on the Fast Leader Show, is that it is that emotional intelligent leader that is the one that is part of a higher producing team. It's not the one who knows everything. It's the one who can get the best out of everyone. That's really the differentiating factor. And even when you started talking about, an important point is that if we stop, what Burroughs was saying is if we stop and think about the future, we can come up with all kinds of ideas. But there was one thing that you actually wrote in the introduction to me that was just so impactful, and I want to share it. And it was that we cultivate thinking about good ideas far too much, while we cultivate the craft of transforming the ideas into reality far too little. What made you come to that type of conclusion?
Yeah, I mean, an idea is also an action in the sense that it can create a change in your own mind. And when an idea's time has come, it can be really powerful, but only if we actually execute on it. And everyone who's been an entrepreneur will know that the idea is very little part and the execution is everything. So the point is that I meet a lot of very nice human beings with great intentions, and I meet too few people that maybe act on this intention because of one reason or another. It's very seldom laziness. It's a lot of times not knowing how to go about it if you don't come from, for instance, a household where it's natural or a culture where it's natural. So I was born in a home and in a family where there has never been an entrepreneur before. So I didn't get it from my parents or from sisters or brothers. And I grew up in a part of our country where when I started my first company in 1999, there was not really an entrepreneurial culture. It was nothing like Silicon Valley or any other places. So then a lot of people become scared of starting up because it doesn't feel natural. Now, when you do it a lot of times, it starts to feel more natural. Not that you don't make mistakes, but it's just like the training part of it. Like you mentioned, I was national champion in badminton, and it's called something completely different. But then on the other side, it's the same with sports as with entrepreneurship, that the more times you practice doing it, the less awkward it feels actually trying to test out a new idea. And of course, you also become better at. So you also become better at being like your own critic. And when you have an idea, you start to understand that there's a far gap between idea and execution. And yeah, I've had so many bad ideas over the years, and luckily I was realistic enough to drop them. And then at some point, like with the startup I'm currently working on, you have this gut feeling that there is a market need for this, and also it feels right. So this is the combination of. That's also why the book has these different topics, because one thing is talking about, listening to yourself and understanding, is this something worth spending the next 5 to 10 years of my life on? Because that's what you have to do if you want to start a growth company. It's going to take 5 to 10 years. So you have to think about this first. Is this worth the time and effort? And then also think realistically, is there a business model here somewhere?
That's really interesting when you start talking about that and how the time component, is one of those factors that, could cause that pause that you were referring to. Because, here's one of the things that it also stood out in the book that you had written in the introduction. And you talked about the difference between, knowledge and learning. And you kind of really were just talking about that yourself as far as being in the right environment, going through and having the mistakes. And, it's not a situation anymore because you've gone through it several times that, you're worried about, certain factors, and you're now worried about other factors. But you talk about that difference between knowledge and learning. It says that, the knowledge and being able to convert it into practice, which is the craft that you need to build, is something that you're responsible for. And so when you start talking about, taking all of this information and the people that, you were referring to, that it's not a laziness thing, it's the know-how thing. You have to get better at know-how, seek that out. Because here's the thing, when you start talking about entrepreneur, and I refer to a lot of people who are within organizations that have to transform. They don't, they have to do things differently than it used to be. The world keeps changing in smaller and smaller clips. It used to be that people would say, well, 10 years ago, and then it became people said, well, 5 years ago. And now it's like, well, 3 years ago. If you're doing what you were doing 3 years ago, that's outdated already. So you have to be someone inside an organization that has that entrepreneurial spirit and has to do things that causes and helps that company to transform. And so when you start thinking about that, those people who are already in a particular position and I need to do something different, where are they going to get their best inspiration to build those skills and build better practices?
Yeah, I really think that the future belongs to the curious people. And we need these curious people in all organizations. And when we start asking questions, I think the main part of good leadership and good entrepreneurship is having people that dare to challenge the status quo, and then having the executors that actually make it happen. And you need that both in startups and in corporates. And oftentimes I see people failing because they have one or the other. So you have an inventor who has a great idea, but hates to sell, or maybe doesn't know how to do it. And then you have the salesman who doesn't really know how to solve problems that are out there, because he has been used to selling products that were already on the market. And the same in organizations. You need to have the leaders that set out a course and don't strive away from it. And then you also need to have the visionary leaders who dare to fail together with their teams. And it's very important that, leadership is, as Simon Sinek writes in the book, leadership is not a rank, it's a choice. So when you decide to become a leader, you also decide to take all the blame if something fails. And we need to have these leaders in organizations that want to change, that are willing to take the blame on behalf of their teams. Because when you innovate, you also fail. And that is sort of what people have been saying for ages. But the problem has been that it's a nice thing to say, but failing also means taking the blame somewhere in an organization. And if the leader doesn't want to take the blame, then you don't want to take the risk. And I see a lot of times in organization where they say, we want to be innovative and we have an innovation strategy and it's okay to fail. And then something really fails. And then everybody is like, yeah, but it was not really my fault, and creates a really bad culture. So you have to mean it. It's not, and that is, again, the thing with this book is that I try to find people that have actually done it. So it exceeds the motivational speaker / mantras, because it's so easy to say, just come up with great ideas and do it. And, fail, think big, act small, fail cheap and fast, blah, blah, blah. We have all these nice sayings, but then we also need to have really courageous and authentic leaders that say, okay, this is part of what I do in this organization. I'm strong enough to take the blame from the CEO when my innovation team loses 10 million because they went in the wrong direction.
I think that's a very great point. I would dare to say, and if you're one of those, creative, leaders that's willing to do all that, you really just need to find the right organization that enables you instead of disables you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we need to have, and I think I mentioned it before, we need to have very different kind of competencies within companies. So we need to have the people that really come up with these bold new ideas. And then we need to have the people that act upon them. And then we need to have the people who are willing to take the blame when they fail. But then on the other hand, also get all the praise when they succeed. And you need these three sort of core competencies, both in a startup and in an established business. And there is a tendency that you don't hire the bold thinkers when you get too corporate, because then you want to streamline everything and make even more money. So you hire the people that are good at making even more money. And there is a tendency in startup to have too many bold thinkers that maybe lack a bit of business understanding or realism, and then they fail because they don't know how to turn this into a profitable business.
Yeah, that's an awesome point. Okay, so, man, going through this book, there's a whole lot of inspiring people, and then you also infused it with a whole lot of quotes from other people, in which, to me, I just enjoyed, going through and just, looking at all the folks that are involved, because there's a lot of names that I never heard of. You exposed me from a global perspective to a lot of people, and I thank you for that. But then also just going back and reflecting on some of the people who've been around, or at least that we've known of, for literally thousands of years, who've kind of started this. You even talked about Aristotle and Socrates, and you talked about several others. And gosh, it just really got me to think about things that inspire us. And on a show, we do that through quotes. Now, I know with all the research and putting all this together, you probably literally have, hundreds, if not thousands of quotes that you can reference. But is there one or two that kind of stands out to you that you can share?
Yeah, and I don't even know if they're from the book actually, but I have two quotes that I love, and they're not the first one. I don't know who actually said this, but I read this quote that the world is giving you answers each day. You just have to listen. A quote that I really love because it sparks this creative, curious mind. And the other one is sort of, maybe it's an entrepreneurial quote, but it's actually from a Bruce Springsteen song. And the song is titled "Working on a Dream." And I love this. I love this title. And a dream can be so different from each one of us. But this thing that should be what you're doing when you're an entrepreneur. In my mind, you have something that is so important that you're willing to fight and take all the hard knocks along the way, because the idea is bigger than yourself.
Well, those are two great ones. Thanks for sharing. Now, I know also you talked about, you going through several iterations from your own startups. You talked about, growing up in an area that, really didn't have that incubation that was happening, for entrepreneurs. So, you had the bold piece, but I know you said, even admitted you failed, and I'm sure there's been other times that you've failed that have actually added, to your knowledge and practice, right? But can you share one of those stories when you had to get over the hump?
Yeah, I mean, I had a very personal one where I had been working too much for 2.5 years and working, 80 hours a week. And I ended up having stress, which turned into a depression. And for someone like me, who has always been, and now today, luckily, is like a happy person, and my mood is very stable. Then going through a period which was almost a year, so like a big hump, where I felt terrible. And I also lost my belief that I was an entrepreneur, because maybe I couldn't handle the stress and the pressure since my body sort of collapsed. And then coming back from this, and this was actually when I started working on the Guru book in Denmark and then globally, saying that now I want to get inspired by people who have done things that I look up to and learn from them, and then based on this, build something, knowing that, I think before, a startup was sort of my life and my identity, and now a startup is something I build and enjoy, but if it fails, it's not me failing, and I can always start a new one. So it sort of also gave perspective, and that is also what I, at least here in Scandinavia, try to teach the young entrepreneurs, that their passion is amazing, and that the human brain can be passionate about everything is amazing, but you should also just remember that we have an old Stone Age brain that has its limitations, and we should respect that and remember that entrepreneurship is beautiful, but there's also a lot of other things in life to consider.
I think that's a really good point. When you start having that identity being determined by what it is that you do instead of who you are, is where it creates problems. And, I want to bring up a really important point, because I get a lot of comments about it, is that, I read a bio that's a little bit more of a personal bio. Yeah, we infuse, some of the things about what people do and stuff. But I tell them, I guess, because a lot of them have to write the bio that I asked for. I mean, they just don't have it and they're ready. And so I explain is that, look, it's not what you do that makes you great. It's who you are that makes what you do great. And I would dare to say that even when you start looking at the gurus that are in this book, you could probably say the same thing about all of them. So when you were going through and looking at, these people and their contributions and the discussions that you had with them, I would dare to say that you found uniqueness in them as people. And then therefore that was the, elixir or the thing that caused them to end up doing the great things that they've done. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was also, and I think I write it in the foreword, I was very hesitant about using the title, the Guru book, because all the people I met didn't want to get referred to as gurus. So that is why I spent some time on explaining what is meant with this, because in the old meaning of the word, it's more like a teacher and a mentor and an inspirator. It's not somebody who is unachievable or that you should look up to like some sort of God, because it's very interesting that for a lot of these people, the more successful they have become, the more humble they have become. And I think that's also a part of what I like about them, because you can also become very successful and very arrogant. And I really try to avoid these kind of people in the book, because I'm very inspired to see how people also grow as human beings. So they realize they've created something amazing, and then they sort of want to pass it on to others. And I think that is a beautiful insight to get. So that's also part of, how do you select 45 people to a book if you have so many. So I was also looking for people where I see, wow, they have built something, perhaps made a lot of money, but now they're really interested in, from, an open, good heart to inspire others. And that is also the purpose with the book. That was to collect these people and give some hands-on advice that others could benefit from.
I'm glad you shared that, because for me, when I think about the word legacy, what is the legacy you want to leave behind? To me, that's what I think about when I think about a legacy that I want to leave behind. I don't want to leave the legacy behind that, hey, I've, had, let's just say, for example, from a money perspective, made tons of money, and now, 3 generations, if they did anything, themselves, will still be able to live off my money. No, that's not a legacy that's going to, like you had said, the billion-dollar companies are going to affect 1 billion lives. It has to have that type of legacy where you're actually making an impact on humanity for the good, not some monetary impact.
Yeah, and especially when we both live in countries, it's not like they don't have problems and they don't have poverty, but it's still countries where you have a big opportunity and you can view your life or your work as something more than just making money. I mean, you can also go to Africa or India, where it would not be fair to ask yourself, is this a meaningful job for me? Because, the meaning is given, you have the job or you die. But in countries that have better options, even though they also have problems, I think it's fair that people ask themselves the bigger question, so does my job give me meaning, and can I provide meaning for others? And that will also, because work is so big part of our lives and we spend so much time on it, I think we should continue to challenge our employees and ourselves in creating environments where it feels meaningful going to work. So it's not just something you do to make money. And that is why I love the entrepreneurial environment, because there's so many crazy people that spend so much time on, building an app that maybe if you look at it from the outside and you are a philosopher, you will think, wow, that app really doesn't make any sense. But for this person, it does. And they can't stop thinking about it when they get up in the morning and go to sleep in the evening. And I love that the brain can become so passionate about something that is perhaps from a philosophical standpoint meaningless.
Talking about passion, we all have goals. And so when I started looking at, you said you're starting your 5th company. You had the Guru book. You had 2 bestsellers prior to that. You've got a lot of you're doing travel and working with a lot of organizations. There's a lot of things that you're working on and doing. But if you say you had one goal, what would it be?
If it's job related, it's working with people that I really like and where we have fun and we inspire each other. So actually building this 5th startup, I've chosen a different approach. Before, I was picking people to the team purely based on skills. So I need this very good programmer and I need this great bookkeeper. And now I'm looking much more at, can I see myself sitting with this person in the airport in Copenhagen, wanting to go to New York, and the plane is 6 hours late? Can I stand sitting there with him for 6 hours, or will it make me go mental? So, really we are putting together a team where we can, because we know we have processes that are going to feel like this, like sitting from a delayed plane in 6 hours, and then we need to still be able to respect each other and have fun.
That's a great point. And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. The number one thing that contributes to customer loyalty is emotions. So move onward and upward faster by gaining significantly deeper insight and understanding of your customer journey and personas with emotional intelligence. With your empathy mapping workshop, you'll learn how to evoke and influence the right customer emotions that generate improved customer loyalty and reduce your cost to operate. Get over your emotional hump now by going to empathymapping.com to learn more. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Jonathan, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet relevant responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Jonathan Lowe, are you ready to hoe down?
Yeah, I'm feeling stressed already.
All right. What do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
That I don't really want to be a leader. I want to be an entrepreneur.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
That I should listen more.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
That I have been born with and developed a very creative mind.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
The lean startup method.
And what would be one book that you'd recommend to our listeners? And it could be from any genre. Of course, we're going to put a link to the Guru book on your show notes page, as well as your 2 other books as well.
A book called Winning Without Losing. About how you can become successful without losing other important things in your life.
Okay, Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Jonathan Lowe, and that's LOW. Okay, Jonathan, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you have been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you. But you can't take everything back. You can only choose one. So what skill or knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
I would take the skill of understanding when I reach my limit work-wise. So I spend more time just having holiday and recharging my batteries.
Jonathan, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Absolutely. I love LinkedIn, and I have a website called listenlouder.pk. Would love to connect.
Jonathan Lowe, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.